Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 66. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has subscribed to the show, who continues to like, share, comment, and support. That support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Samson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room build-outs from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Samson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength and conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Samson as their top resource for all their weight room renovations because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovation upgrades, be sure to check out samsonequipment.com to see how Samson has been delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out cerberusstrength.com and use promo code strength_game to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I'm joined by Mark Ellis. Mark is an assistant strength conditioning coach at Princeton University, where he oversees the Tigers' men's lacrosse, men's soccer, men's swimming, men's and women's diving, and women's tennis programs. Before arriving at Princeton in 2021, Ellis was an assistant athletic performance coach at Stony Brook University. He began his coaching career as a volunteer strength coach at Hofstra University. In addition to his collegiate experience, he has worked as a strength coach at Professional Physical Therapy, as well as a head lacrosse coach for Garden City Middle School, both in New York. A former college lacrosse player, Ellis started his career as a defensive midfielder at Stony Brook University. However, after his initial 2 first seasons and redshirting 1 year and then being sidelined due to injury the following season, he transferred to finish his final 2 years of eligibility at Hofstra while completing his graduate studies. He went on to become team captain of the Pride in his final season before being selected in the 2019 MLL Rookie Selection Draft by the New York Lizards, where he played for the subsequent 2019 and 2020 seasons. Following his professional lacrosse career, Ellis is still heavily involved in lifting, using his own training to stay healthy and test out new programs before implementing them with the many different college teams and athletes he works with. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Mark Ellis. What's going on, everybody? Today, I'm joined with a fellow lax companion. We got Coach Mark Ellis on the show. What's going on today, man?
How you doing? How you doing? Happy to be here.
Hey, man, I'm happy to have you on. And first off, I know it's not exactly how you guys wanted to end, but obviously, great season. Congratulations on getting to championship weekend. I mean, like you said, before you kind of ran into the juggernaut, but you guys played a hell of a season.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was. I was just really happy for these guys. I mean, obviously, before I got here, 2020, they were 5-0, like top 5, and COVID happened. And it's like now, obviously, Princeton being a very historical program. It's like, what if? So to kind of take the next step and get back to the Final Four and being where we should be, I was excited for them. Like that was so cool because I've been in those shoes before.
I know that was crazy because, like you said, for those that didn't know, like the Ivies basically didn't play for 2 years, and there was a lot of things, a lot of changes going on with all the athletes, with all the support staff, just with the departments and everything too. We'll probably touch on that a little bit later because you stepped in kind of when it was still a little uncertain. But before we kind of get to all that stuff and like how you guys continued that progress from COVID starting until like your first full season with the Tigers program, we'll start back a little bit. Like, how'd you actually get started in the strength game, kind of leading to your own professional career in lacrosse?
So how I got started was I was playing lacrosse like in high school and college. I was always a pretty fit kid. I think the biggest thing for me, like when I wanted to get recruited for football, the biggest thing was I was just undersized. I had some offers and stuff like that, but I just wasn't up to par. Then I got to college, and my coach wasn't my lacrosse coach was not into lifting whatsoever. More cardio based, versa climber, treadmill sprints, body weight stuff. Then I got to the point where my junior year I tore my ACL, and at that point I'm like, I need to get back. And from there, graduated early from Stony Brook. Then I found, or he found me, my mentor, Jimmy Prendergast. And from there, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to grad school here, and got into grad school. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be like, they're like, we have some exercise science program if you want to get into it. And I was like, sure, I'll be a AT. Then one day he was like, you want to do this? And I was like, do what? And he's like, you want to coach for a living? And I was like, you get paid to do this. Like you get paid to train athletes full time. And he's like, yeah. So from that point on, it kind of started really late for me. So it's probably 21 years, not like, yeah, it's probably 21 years old, 22 years old. I really found myself like what I wanted to do, strength conditioning.
Yeah, you kind of fell into it, just like not knowing exactly what you wanted to do. And then having a good mentor along the way always helps, because I think the same as you, like I didn't really know that strength conditioning was a viable option. Like I knew obviously someone had the position. I'm talking to him right now, but you really don't know exactly what their job entails, or that you can actually make a career out of it. What were you originally going to school for? And like, before you like want to do athletic training, what do you think was like your career path originally like slated to be?
So all my friends were like marketing majors. I was like a marketing major, minor in African studies. Like I was just like, all right, I'm an athlete. Didn't think I was going to grad school. I was like, I need to get out of college and just figure out my way. I took an internship. Not internship. I interviewed for a job at at New York Life Insurance. Got there and I was like, you sitting there talking about numbers, how you sell people. And I'm like, dude, this is not for me. Like, this is not for me. And it's full circle. Like, I was just like, I get to train athletes who want to just get better. Like people who are just motivated. And the big thing about like obviously strength conditioning is like you want to do private or you want to do college. And like I did the private thing, I loved it, but it was like more selling. And I'm like, I don't want to sell. I want people to come in who are hungry to kind of, and you have it built in with athletes. So I took that route.
Yeah, that's the big thing. I've talked to a lot of people that are in the private sector, and like some people just hate the selling aspect of it. And I think some people like understand that it's part of the business, but more so are looking for people like we talked about that are athletes that are like-minded and kind of hungry to get after it. And that you feel like, I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's easy to mentor and it's easy to relate to people like that actually want to be there, rather than take people's money and feel like I have to force you to be here. And it becomes real transactional at that point.
Yeah, like I get to the point where like I was at a gym and it's like you have 10 packages and this kid's on his 9th package and he's like, and my boss like, make sure he renews. And I'm like, I love the kid, like I don't care if he renews or not. Like I get paid like whatever. Like going to his mom, like, oh, is your mom here? And he's like, oh, his mom's outside. He's like, oh, well, this is your last thing today, your last session. And it's like, I hate that transaction. I just don't like it. Cause I know like I know I have to get paid. I know the business has to be there, but this kid is coming in just looking for answers. That's all he's asking. He's not asking for like you to, not asking for money. He's asking for answers. He wants knowledge from you. So like that's always, and I get it. I think the private sector is great. You can make money, a lot of money. Sky's the ceiling. The harder you work, the more you make off of it. But at the same time, it's like that purity of like college athletics. I think it's really cool, and I kind of kept me in this path for now.
Like it. Yeah. Hey, who knows? Who knows? Like we said, like talking a little bit before we actually got recorded, a lot of people that like, and that like from some of the places, like people that are familiar on staff, like we talked about people shift, like even getting out of the collegiate realm for coaching, getting the private sector, the tactical side. Like there's so many viable options now that maybe someone doesn't stay in college their whole life, but I mean, who knows? You could change after a while. But talking about like when you first got started playing and like your coach originally, like really not like buying into the weight room as much and more on the conditioning cardio side. what kind of sparked your interest into lifting, and then taking it from like a collegiate side? I know you transferred over after to like actually continue your career. What actually like motivated you to keep pushing it towards like the professional ranks too?
So I want to say it's a funny story. So my best friend played football at Syracuse, and he left the day after graduation in high school. And I went to prep school for a year, but that summer he left June something and came back August before the season started, and he gained 16 pounds. And I was like, he's like, let's go to the gym. And he put me through a workout. And I never forget, I was bantered, bruised. Like, I was like, this is nuts. And I worked out before, like meathead, like videos and stuff like that. Stuff you see on YouTube, think you should do. But he came back and he had an organized workout. And he's like, all right, this is how you do it. And I was shocked. I'm like, you do this how many times a week? He's like, I do this 5 times a week, 4 times a week. And I'm like, he's like, plus conditioning. And I was like, this is nuts. Like my coaching college was like, for lacrosse was like, all right, he was so harped on the 2-mile test. Like, so your whole summer was like, I got to make this 2-mile test. Or I wasn't good at lacrosse pretty much. Like, and I was like, under the standard. So I got to that point. I'm like, okay, the weight room for me was more about delegation to the long ride, or the wear on your body, how you could sustain like a high level early rather than anything. That's how I sell to my athletes. That's how I sell to myself. I'm like, you want to be a high level for longer, or be at your pinnacle, train. You have to train to be the strongest guy in the room, but train optimally and do that over long periods of time. 3 weeks turn into a month turn into 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 months, and whatever it is. But you get to the point where you're like physically seeing difference and you physically feel different on the field. I'm strong on the field, where for me as a D midi, where a guy jams me, like hands are tight. Before it's kind of hard to extend those arms and feel pressure. But now I'm able to absorb that and kind of give that out. So like as I got more and more into training, I felt like, okay, I need to be more smart about how I train as well. Because you think about it, you Arnold Schwarzenegger, like pumping iron, like this is what I need to do, and it's like, yeah, that comes with it, but it's more optimal, more efficient, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, that's a big thing that everybody that's doing it right, I think, preaches for the weight room. It's like it's adaptability, it's longevity, it's looking at long-term gains and performance benefits. And if you're training the best way to actually perform at your sport, like that is a vessel. It's a tool that you can use to make sure that you're playing even longer into your career. And it's not just a 4-year thing in high school or a 4-year thing tacked on in college. Like if you want to, and you have the skills and you have the ability and the work ethic, you can actually extend it to a professional level if your sport allows it. And for you were able to do that like for 2 seasons, like in the PLL and like professional lacrosse and everything. At that time, like how were you balancing like kind of dabbling into coaching? Because as soon as you were done with your career, you got right into coaching. But how were you able to like balance your own training while simultaneously still kind of keeping a foothold in strength and conditioning? Or were you all in on one side or another?
So it's kind of crazy. So right after I graduated, I became an intern. I graduated my master exercise science and became an intern for Jimmy Prendergast. And from there I got drafted. So I knew I got drafted. So I was interning from 5:30 in the morning to 12. I would train myself within that period. We had like a block that we trained as a staff. Then from there I would go from like 12:30 to like 1:30 or 2 and just train lacrosse on the field at Hofstra. Meanwhile, I just graduated, so it's like home for me anyway. From there, I would go to the private sector because I had to make money. Had to make some more money. So I did the private sector like from like 3:30 to like around 7 or 8. So what I did was I just made sure when I was at Hofstra, and I still had guys around like underclassmen. So I was always in lacrosse still. So I was right out of the season, so I was fresh. Wasn't very much different for me. That second year was the big year about being on your own. Because you think about it, and I kind of wrote down here, like it's hard to supplement that volume in practice when you're working. So now I go from not practicing every day. I go from coaching 13 to not 9 hours to 13 hours a day, then working on myself within that period, then coaching again for like another 2 hours, 3 hours at the end of the day. Like it was just a long period. But like for me, I was embracing lacrosse. Now I like training. Like for me, it was easy. It really was because it was like I've been playing lacrosse my whole life, but now I got school. So like I got school, I'm working, I'm coaching. And for me as an intern, I was just absorbing a lot of things. Like at that young age, you don't really have team responsibilities. So for me, it was just more like a fly on the wall. We used to call it Hofstra.
Yeah, that's the best part about it. I miss those times sometimes, just to
Mm-hmm.
be able to not really have any obligations other than
Yeah.
coach and absorb stuff, learn, ask questions. And I can do that with like some of my like staff and colleagues here where I don't have to program or I don't have to do anything. I can just kind of go out on the floor and float around and talk to athletes and stuff. And that stuff is awesome.
That's the best. That's the
All the
best.
bureaucratic bullshit stuff, all the other
Yeah.
things like I could do without for a good amount of time, but that stuff is fun. That balance is so hard because like we kind of know and the league is growing and it's getting better. Like MLL kind of dissolving into PLL and like it legitimizing and becoming like more of a professional league where people can actually kind of live off it better. But it's still kind of in its infancy, like from where it is in some of the bigger sports in like the US and even abroad. So yeah, you have to work on the side and you still have to like fix your craft. And every single person I've talked to that has played and has had to balance work, playing, everybody has said year 2 is the hardest because you are like finally away from college. Like everybody tries to hold on for that semester or for that summer just to
Mm-hmm.
play. And then after that, like you really have to grow up because those resources are kind of gone and
Yeah.
all your teammates are gone and everything too. It's that's a big transition for sure. So
I think I think
go for it.
sorry. I think the biggest thing for other people, I think for different for like me, an example was I was like, our craft is physical, like it's coaching, it's sport. It's like I was always like I always feel like I was always prepared because I was always around. Coach Shane, like you want to come out and play like scout for us. Like I was like, yeah, like, I'll do scout, like in the fall and stuff like that. So like other guys, people are finance, people in Wall Street, people in Manhattan, people are traveling from Texas to come play in the game. I'm like, you just worked 48 hours this week, 50 hours this week. I coach for that, but I'm around it. Like for you, now you have to work that 50 hours. Now I'll go to the gym and then train. So it's like a different animal. I give kudos to those guys. For me, it was just like, it was easy for me because I was always training. I was running anyway. I was around the game of lacrosse. So I was doing wall ball. The guys kept me young. Like, so I think that was easy for me. Those other guys kudos to them.
Yeah, to be able to like turn it on and turn it off like as soon as you get out of like the corporate kind of style. That's
Mm-hmm.
the guys I was like the pro guys I was working with when I was at Loyola. I remember them coming in and we would train early in the morning and then they'd have to go to like Fortune 500 companies like downtown Baltimore. And I'd see them as I was like passing by in the hallway and they got their suits on and everything. I was like, good luck at work, guys.
Yeah, literally.
It was such a different beast. So when you were like initially like transitioning over and you were starting to working like interning at Hofstra, were you actually working with lacrosse guys as well?
Yeah. So like for me, so I went from, and I was a captain my senior, so I was kind of a leader anyway. And that was the most nerve-wracking moment for me. I'll be honest. I go from going out Saturday nights with the guys and doing all that kind of stuff, being a student. Then the minute I graduated, like May something, and I started interning. So now I had to have that talk with my coach, my mentor, like, hey, like now you're in a different position now. Like some things you can't do. And I know you love your friends, but like this is what you want to do. You have to kind of build that boundary. So from there, I really didn't. I had to grow up like mature. I did mature a little bit more, and from there, I was an intern. Then Coach Jimmy late in my internship because he trusted me a lot. He was like, he gave me, um, what did he give me? He gave me a template for like a tier system, and he's like, all right, fill this out. You're gonna take all the freshman basketball players. In basketball, it's like 3 guys, maybe 2 guys on the roster coming in. But like, he's like, you got him. Like, I'm not worried about it. You got him. Like, I'm teaching guys how to like depth drop off a box and stuff like that. So you see guys, Valgus and freshmen, basketball players, and you're like, whoa, like he's trusting me to do this. And it was a kind of a cool moment for me. But like more so as a coach, as a young guy, like, okay, now you see your stuff working. Now I see those guys now, and I'm like, I remember because they came into the summer. I'm like, oh, you were my first athlete, literally my first athlete I ever like had responsibility of. So that was a cool moment for me.
Yeah, you kind of touched on exactly what I was going to ask, because there's not too many times that people have the opportunity to like actually go and play for a team. Like obviously you captained your last year too, so like you said, you were in a leadership role, but going from there and transitioning and like putting a coach hat on right away is super difficult. Like I know a few people when I was at Salisbury did it. I did the same thing, and I was still living with some of the guys, which was even weirder. And it's a tough transition, and it forces you to really like draw the line in the sand about like what you want to do. And you have to realize like at that point in time, like my 6 years of college, like that's done. Like if I actually want to turn this into a career and I want to actually be professional with this, like that stuff is done. It's past. I have to differentiate myself from the team a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that was like not the tough part for me, but it was tough for my friends because like I'm used to going out, hanging out with them. Even like the thing about it's not like you can't hang out with them, but it's like certain situations. You're just like it's just gonna be a good situation for me. Like you go out, you go with your friends, like being like normal, which is fine. But then you get to the point where they're like, "Oh, we want to go out to a bar where other athletes are." Like it's one thing to have my friends at the house, like my teammates, but then I'm going to a bar, and now I'm like, I was helping out coaching basketball, incoming freshman in volleyball, and then we're going to the volleyball house, whatever. I'm like, I can't do that. Like, why not? I'm like, I literally these freshmen don't even know me. They don't know me as an athlete. You know me only as a coach, so I can't go over there for those reasons. So that was like the give and pull, and it wasn't like as if like we were just drinking this drink, but it's like more of a leadership now. You see me lesser than what I am. No, I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to see me as a coach, and I can always pull back within the weight room, in the structure of the weight room, to be more comfortable with them. I think, but you have to set that boundary, I think, a little bit higher earlier, especially if any young coach, set the boundary really high. You set the boundary really high, build the wall really high, and you could partly pull it down because it's hard to come out really low or really soft and turn it up. Because I was like, you weren't like that before,
Yeah.
like so. That's the thing I think I do really well with. Like I was very behind exercise science growing up. I did some bio stuff, but not exercise science. Stony Brook didn't have that. So I was in kinesiology classes. I was in all these small classes, obviously, prehabs, to get ready for my CSCS. Like I was doing all this stuff. And I'm like, all I have to my name is people trust me. I'm a leader and I can communicate really well. So learning all that stuff on the fly as my grad program, then becoming a coach, it was like, okay, I have that part. How can I mold this together to be a successful coach and a coach that people can trust, athletes can trust.
Right. No, that's a great point. I think setting the boundaries high in the beginning, you could start to back off and like loosen up on the reins a little bit more. But if you come in like real low under the radar and then like you stamp your fist after that, like they're completely lost. It's a lot easier to go the other way. But no, I think like you talked about, like some of those soft skills and those intangibles, like being able to communicate, being a good leader, just commanding a room and being personable with your athletes. I think that goes a long way. The other stuff, like educating yourself and figuring out all the anatomy, the biology, all that stuff, and exercise science things, like those things come. But if you don't have like the communication style, if you can't actually command the room and carry a conversation, because it's a service industry and it's a people business, that all the other stuff, like it doesn't matter. And that's why like professional, like athletes that are like great power lifters, great strongman, great Olympic lifters, like maybe they don't have the credentials and they don't have all the letters that fall behind their name, but those people can coach with the best of them. And
1000%.
I argue that is way more important. And then you can collect that other stuff as you go.
1000%. I couldn't agree with you more.
Hey, so transitioning to like a full-time role, obviously like that was one of the things that you kind of had to build upon a little bit more, because you hopped right in. Like as soon as you were done with school, like grad school was done, you started interning, like you were still playing, and then you started to slowly get out like for the professional side. But what were some of like the really big challenges that you kind of had to endure getting to like your first full-time coaching role?
So yeah, let me backtrack a little bit. So when I started my internship at Hofstra, to like a full year. And that following year, I think it was 2020. Then obviously like in March, COVID happened. And for me, I was making money in the private sector, but now I wasn't now that school was closed. I wasn't getting experience, like the coaching experience. You get experience in private all you want, but college coaches don't care about that. Like you're hiring somebody like, oh, I got 10 years of private. It's like, yeah, I don't care. So like for me, it was more so, okay, how can I figure this out? And I worked my private jobs. We did like intern stuff online at Hofstra. Then my mentor came to me and he goes, I hate to do this, but we just can't pay you right now. Like, I know you want to get paid and we can't pay you out of school. And I was like, no problem. He's like, you want to go back to Stony Brook? And I was like, he's like, I hate to lose you to Stony Brook, obviously, Long Island rival, but it's you grew up there, that's home for you. And I was like, awesome. So out during the bubble, that bubble happened in 2020. I took an internship, or I took a grad assistant at Stony Brook. And it's just lacrosse and swimming, women's lacrosse and swimming. And from there, we trained through COVID. Like we worked out, we did all that kind of stuff, which is obviously a lot of parameters to that. But then that year, was a year, I think it was like September to December, like I was there at Stony Brook. Then I started like looking for jobs. Cause I'm like, I'm doing really well here, but like I gotta make money. I just gotta make money. I took an application to a different D3 school, got the job. I don't want to say the school, got the job and turned it down. My mentor looked at me and said, treat yourself like a first round draft pick. And he said, you in your accolades, you can go to a lot of D3 schools just based off who you are, especially lacrosse wise. But he said, treat yourself and challenge yourself to go somewhere where you can push. I was like, okay. And at this time, this D3 school was 10 months, 45,000. It was, for me, I was like, dude, this is nuts. Like, as a young coach, you don't know how much people say they make a lot of money, but you know how this industry is. I don't want to go into that. But people say they make a lot of money. But when I heard that, I was like, it's a huge check for me. This is awesome. And he's like, just treat yourself a little bit better. Like what? And I was like, all right. Like, so I said, I'm gonna stay at Stony Brook, and I don't want to be a guy who hopped around everywhere anyway. Stony Brook lacrosse was top 5 in the country, women's lacrosse, working with Joe Splina. And then all of a sudden, my buddy called me and he was like, Princeton shop's opening for lacrosse. And I was like, well, he just told my coach I'm not leaving. He's like, he'll understand if you apply for it. And I was like, okay. And then I got some more talks and stuff like that. Then applied for it, ended up getting it. And it was like the coolest moment for me to not, because the alumni reached out and it was like, whoa. Because like it's I have other teams, but it's a very lacrosse based. Like my spring is very light compared to in like my fall, because lacrosse and because I travel with them. But going into that full-time role, it was the most nerve-wracking thing. Because now, and it might sound crazy, but like now I got full-time and I got health insurance, I got dental insurance I got to worry about. I got to pay a lot. I got to pay taxes now. That I got to do all that kind of stuff. And I was paying taxes before, but now this is what you make. You make so and so. Doesn't change right now. Your salary, whatever it was. And with that, it's like expectations. And it's like, okay, how do I step into a program mid-year? Only 20 athletes going to be there, and for those 20 athletes, out of those returners, the guys who were contributors, not the guys who weren't contributors. We had a lot of guys who actually came back with contributors, but the seniors, the leadership wasn't there during that gap year. So for me, it was just very nerve-wracking dealing with a new job, a new team, several new teams, a new boss, a new program, and a new area. And now you're at Princeton. You're at Ivy League school. I'm like, I couldn't sniff at Princeton if I wanted to in college, in high school. So that was just more nerve-wracking about everything else. And you hear things like they're really smart, they're going to challenge you, and all those things didn't bother me. But like coming into a job that started off on a Zoom, like my interview was on a Zoom the whole time. I didn't get to meet anybody. My first day at work was my first day pulling up on campus. So that was like a really nervous moment for me. But once you get coaching and guys see who you're about and what you do want to be about, and it just made it easy. And obviously playing lacrosse, it made it easy for those guys to kind of relate to me.
Yeah, that's kind of a good transition. Obviously, like with that being your primary sport, obviously you can relate to those guys a lot easier than maybe some of the other programs that you haven't had the opportunity to work for. I mean, you had swim, when you were at like Stony Brook, but
Yep.
to take on like soccer and like assist with football, like obviously you have some football experience and everything too, but I mean, if you're helping out along the lines too with anybody on staff, like you might be training squash or wrestling, or
Yeah.
you might have some stuff that like you just haven't seen before. So like when you're going about like working with some of the athletes that you haven't worked with necessarily or don't have like a good background athletically, how do you start to build some trust and buy-in from them? Because I know the same goes for me. Like I played lacrosse, so like it's easy to relate to my lacrosse guys. It's a little bit different to relate, and I have to have a different relationship with my volleyball girls. I've never
Yeah.
played volleyball in my entire life.
Mhm.
So how do you kind of balance that, and how do you start to kind of build a relationship, build some trust, and like command the room in like a different way for teams that you don't have as much experience with?
So I say it this way. As a strength coach, this is literally my 1,000 belief as a strength coach. I have to be 100% with you all the time. You come into the weight room, you tell me, hey, coach, I could lift 500 pounds. You know what I'm going to say? Show me. The weight room doesn't lie. Like you can't lie in there. You can say you're going to do all this stuff, but it never lies. So my job for you is not to lie to you. When you come to me and say, hey, coach, I don't think I'm playing well enough. I'm like, you check all the boxes. Are you doing extra stuff? Are you coming in for training? Are you coming for treatment? So for me, I tell like your effort in here, I might not know the sport, but from like back of my hand. But if you come in here and you work hard, my idea is they're gonna work hard on the field as well. I feel like things carry over no matter what they are. The second thing for me was going to practice for all those other sports. So my other sports I have men's soccer, I have men's and women's diving, men's swimming, women's tennis, men's lacrosse. I have 5 teams. So for me, for my swimmers and my divers, like, oh, this guy's a lacrosse coach. I went to practice for the first like month. Like I went to practice, just stood there and just watched. I was like amazed, first of all. We have really good swimmers, really good divers. So it was like, whoa, okay. And I was at Stony Brook, we had good swimmers and divers, but like we have like Olympians, like we have all Americans here. And I was like, and they have a long history of that. Tennis, I come in, we have the number 1 girl in the country for tennis. I'm like, that's Jesus Christ. So like I was just coming in like to like that's not me. I come into teams that are just loaded. So I'm like, I have to do everything in my power to give them what they need. I may not have the soccer or the tennis or the diving experience, but what they want effort from a strength coach who understands them and they can trust. That is the biggest thing. So what I did by that was just going to practice, asking them questions every day in lift. We end with a fun fact, no matter what it is. Every lift of my teams, I'm like, I want something fun about you, something about you did this weekend, and we do it every day. So now that we don't do it, my team's like, what's the fun fact today? Like, I can actually, how was your morning? Walk me through your morning. And the guys walk me through, or ladies walk me through, hey, woke up at this time, had a burger, or I did that. And that's the cool things that we do to kind of grow that trust. And I'll talk a little bit about myself, what I did, what sports I played. But like you said, that interaction, like the weights are the weights. But like when a kid trusts you, you got them. Then you kind of lead them blindly. And my coach, like as a strength coach, my mentor, like he I don't want to say, it might sound bad, but he like hypnotized me to think that like you're in here and you're gonna be the best version of yourself. And I think in there you could be. That it doesn't, what you do in the weight room doesn't dictate what you do on the field. Like that's the thing about it. Like I think people get like, oh, I don't have to do good in the weight room. I can do good in the field. It's like it's hard. Great people don't turn it off. Like really great. That's what not everybody's great, but that's my engine. I want you to be the great version of who you are. So going back full circle, going to practice, talking to coaches, letting coaches send me stuff. You know, coaches like to send me stuff. Like, you have any ideas? Send me stuff. It's having an open book at first. As much as I don't like everything they send me, but we discuss it. Then we talk about it. And something like, oh crap, coach, I sent you something stupid. And I'm like, all right, no problem. Like, but I want them to know that I'm an open book when it comes to this. Like we have some tennis athletes go, hey, I did this in running. And I go, okay, how can we implement that a little bit in here? Then they're like, oh, now we're invested. Now they feel like I have a part of this program. And that's all I'm about. Like when I first got here for my lacrosse team, I had like 20 guys. I go, what do you guys like to do? They like the bench, like trap bar. And I'm like, all right, let's do those things. Like they wanted back squat. So we're going to front squat first when I first saw them. But like that was, okay, you give some, I take some. From that moment, it's like, I'm like, when he guys called to me and goes, Coach, I want to bench press. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to add eccentrics to it. But you want to bench press. So you get what you want. I get what I want. And we're training. We're getting stronger. We're training efficiently. Like, I think the biggest thing I think people have is especially in this industry, is very ego. Like, obviously, as a leader, I have to put down like where I want things to happen. But as much as your athletes are involved, the better off you are, because they can't say to you like, "Oh, coach made me do this." Yeah, I did, but you're part of this too. Like, as much as I'm a part of it, like, I want you guys to enjoy it, because once you enjoy it, you do it more and more. So I think that's a big thing for us and what I want to do my first year at Princeton.
No, I love that. Getting their input, obviously, and being invested, and not just them, but their sport, the things they like just all those intangible things, like the fun fact, all that stuff is huge, and it builds on it. And now to the point where they're harassing you for
harassing.
No, I think that's great. And I think you're right too. Like, a lot of strength coaches end up getting super rigid with their program, but it's awesome to hear you come in and have it like a give take relationship with what do you guys want? Give me some feedback, not only from the athletes, but from the coaching staff and everything. Cause that's one thing too. Like, when you're super heavy, or like you're a football coach and you have golf as your second team, everybody knows that you came here for football. You played football in college. You played maybe football like in the CFL, NFL, or whatever. Like, the same with you. Like, everybody knows that you came here primarily to work with lacrosse. But when you go in and you invest in the other sports and you talk to the other coaches and you feel what they need the most too, and you treat them the same way, because you're never going to catch up in the same experience. You're never going to be able to dive like the rest of your girls do. So,
yeah,
but if you're there and you're learning stuff and you're talking to the coaches and everything, I think they're bought in beyond belief. So the difference, like you talked about, and I want to touch on a little bit more, is like the alumni reaching out to you and everything at Princeton. Like, it is a historic school. There's a big alumni network, and there's big expectations, obviously, on the academic side and the athletic side. And that's a little bit different for you stepping into those things. How do someone, especially in their first like job and like first full-time one, how do you kind of manage those expectations and like start to set a standard with your team, knowing that like, one, it's hundreds of years of like, this is what we've been doing. How do you kind of put your spin on it without when it's still kind of building on the tradition that's already been in place?
So this might sound crazy, but when I first got here, I refused to look at records of any school. I knew lacrosse, but I refused to look at any records. Looked at my athletes like on the roster, but I refused to look at any records. So I got here, I just wanted them to know, no matter what your record was, what you did before me, what you did after me, that I'm going to be invested in you to the point that you're like, I'm going to be annoying. I'm going to ask you about, okay, what does this mean in diving? What is that? Like, I ask those questions all the time. I went to diving practice. I was sitting there with like signs, like 10, like for all the flips, and the coach is looking at me like, I'm like, it looked great to me. Like, I was joking around to make it more pleasurable for that way. But to get that first full-time expectations, I think you want to lower yourself, because obviously you want to win. You want to win everything. But knowing where your athletes stand. So for me, like finding that first month of where my athletes stand, like, oh crap, we have really good athletes, like really good athletes. And some of them don't look great on land. Like, to be honest, some of them don't. But some of them look great in the weight room, but then they do their sport. And I'm like, whoa, that's what they're more confident is. So for me, it was more about going there, introducing myself to who I am, to the alumni, to the staff, and saying, whatever you need from me, I'm going to give 100% of that. So if that means 100% of me just for like my soccer team in season, I don't lift that much in season, that means me coming to practice after practice and doing band stretches, core twice a week, I'll do that. That'll be about 100% to you. So, and I think with that, being more personable when you don't have that time with those athletes because they're not in the weight room, is going to practice as much, seeing them on campus, asking them questions, like having a group chat, joking around, tell them we may have open hours here if you want to come roll out here. Having just putting the time in, the effort, especially in that first month of being here full time, you want to have a good impression with everybody. But like, it's not for me, it wasn't an impression. It was just like who I am and what I learned from like Jimmy Prendergast and the Hofstra and the Stony Brook culture. It's about like, all right, this is who we are. We're together. Like, if you need anything from me, let me know. And it's not about bothering me. I may bother you sometimes. I come into your office and be like, hey, coach, like, anybody diving today? Anybody swimming today? Anybody playing soccer today? I just go there and sit down and watch practice. Because that COVID year was just like, I'll go to work at from like 8 to like I'll have a team of 8 to 9. That was my team. Worked and everybody else like practiced and went to go do drills. And I was like, I'll just go watch them do their thing. And we didn't know if they were going to play or not. But it was just having those expectations from a long program like that. Obviously, lacrosse specifically, it was great because now I'm like, I'm gonna have people behind me to kind of keep me accountable. But at the same time, like it's happened before. Like for Stony Brook and Hofstra, like in my time, like they haven't been to a Final Four or make a big playoff run. So it's not really feasible. Sometimes it gets hard to be feasible when you don't really touch it. But like walking past in Princeton and seeing national champion trophies and seeing quarterfinal trophies, Final Four trophies, and those guys know that, it just makes it that much more invested.
Right. Yeah. It feels a lot more tangible when it's already been done before. Like you're not really trying to break the ceiling at that point because it's already been done. Like you're trying to repeat it and you're trying to do it in your own way, which is different. But no, kind of hearing about everything that you did in the first month, I think that's great advice for anybody stepping into a new role, stepping into their first role. Those are things, just making yourself viable, making yourself available at all times. Like each team is going to have different requirements or different needs or different like abilities in the weight room or requirements for what they want you to be. And it's our job as like strength coaches to kind of be adaptable and just fill in those gaps and really just do what they need to be done, like within a reasonable manner, obviously. But that's for another day. But no, you talked about it too a little bit. Obviously, like it was a different situation for COVID and everybody dealt with it in their own manner. California's dealing with it its own shit show way, which I had to deal with until I got to get out and get to Florida, which was a complete 180. But for the Ivy Leagues, they were pretty outspoken. And they were the first team, they were first conference that were like, we're not doing this. And I remember like when I was still at Fresno State and COVID, like in March of 2020 hit, I think we were either the last or one of the last games to be played in the country. And it was us versus Yale, like women's lacrosse. It was Fresno versus Yale. And we turned that into both our team's senior day because we had no idea what was going to happen next.
Wow.
And come to find out, like those girls on the Yale side were never going to play again, or like for a few of them. So talk about a little bit like what it was like, because you stepped in still an uncertainty. Like you accepted the job in 2021 in like the spring, and it still wasn't set in stone whether or not the Ivies were going to play. Like why was it important for you to like take that position, and what were you kind of doing in preparation, knowing that you might not even play for the next year, 2 years? No one knew what was going to happen. How do you keep those guys engaged?
The best, I'm talking about lacrosse right now specifically. The best thing but the best thing that happened in my coaching experience was that COVID year, because now I had my mindset and talk to the coaches. My mindset was we're not playing. The odds of us playing is very slim. So I'm going to train like we're not playing. So I had that from February, I started February 1 till May, whatever, to just train, teach you guys who I am, get my philosophy down, and have those guys be my spokesman to the rest of the team. So they come in and say, hey, coaches, and we aren't conditioning that much. Coaches are sprinting us a lot. Like we're sprinting a lot. And they're like, okay, like they like the idea of it. But like those guys speaking out during that COVID year helped them help me believe that my stuff was working, in a sense that like I could be a piece of this puzzle they have here at Princeton with lacrosse. So for me, I just wanted to let those athletes know who couldn't be there because they all withdrew, that I'm doing my part for these younger classmen. For you, so you guys, when you guys have the opportunity to come back, they'll be prepared for you guys. Because I know how it feels to be that senior, and wanting freshmen to step up or be ready. And I mean, you can't rush that, but like knowing like you see those guys like you're 1 year away from really, really good. So I'm like, I want to use that 1 year, that 6 months, 5 months to be like, okay, I'm going to physically get you prepared to be a D1 athlete. Because at this point, some of them haven't been D1 athletes before. So that's what a D1 Princeton offseason looks like. So now when they come in the next year, the guys who are seniors, juniors, they're freshmen in the weight room to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like my terminology, those freshmen understand my terminology. Those sophomores like understand my terminology. Remember when the moment they got back or they're allowed to get back on team builder we had a group, the guys like, we need a group me. We made a group me. We did Zooms. I did Zooms at the field, just going through stuff and understanding what I wanted expectation was. So the first day we got back to school, I think for 3 days before school, I had like the whole team back wanting to train. It was like that. It was cool to me. So it was like, okay, they're ready for what we're doing. And my biggest idea behind what we're doing was just like, I told guys we're going to compete nonstop. I'm gonna hold you really accountable. And my selling process, we're not going to condition. Like we're gonna work. But obviously I realized that like sprinting a lot is very much work. And now understanding how much it goes into like technique at sprinting. And we did like literally a one-on-one class of like technique, and those freshmen, like that freshman this year before, got it. But those seniors, they slowly started to pick about like, oh, this is what we're doing. And this is why we're doing it. So it's kind of like a cool experience.
No,
those sophomores, freshmen were now seniors teaching the seniors.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool though, because that shows that the younger guys too, like have those leadership characteristics in them, and it's even probably just as cool, if not better, that the upperclassmen were willing to take that like coaching from like a younger kid that has no idea what he's doing, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's a young kid that's coming in that's never seen the field, never really worn like the colors, anything for that program, and to be able to sit back and like actually take what they're saying and take it in, that's pretty awesome. And that's where like those player-led teams really come into play, because everybody's a coach.
We were so player-led. It was kind of crazy, actually. We were so player-led. Like when they first walked in the weight room, like I'm big into, I'm very big because I realized that it's the Hofstra or in Stony Brook, no matter which, and Coach Shane said, he's like, I'm going to be here. But this is my year, 2019 team. So when I walked in the weight room and like the freshmen and seniors are there, I go, all right, freshmen, grab a senior. Juniors of the class, the guys who were here last year, gap year guys, I call my JUCO guys, the guys who were here for the gap year. My JUCO guys, grab returners. And I'll go through the lift, and the guys know the terminology. And I'm like, hey, you guys are teaching them this. And it was my way of finding my way of figuring out more names and faces for those gap year guys. But at the same time, now like they're invested in each other, because now you need someone to teach you this and someone to teach you that.
No, that's awesome. I think that's a great tool to kind of use to pair people up to. And it worked out in your instance where like that's who you actually got to teach and have like all the terminology and your waypoint of like training underneath their belt. In a normal year, like how would you kind of use that stuff to like have would you do the same way where now the upperclassmen are kind of leading the younger guys, so you can kind of learn names again, kind of get a feel for the players? And like, when do you start like handing off the reins for it to be player led a little bit more in the weight room? Or is it really just based off like a feeling, or is it something objective you can really kind of measure?
I think it's a little bit objective, but at the same time, like those seniors, man, and probably your time, like those seniors this year, because of COVID, had to be such leaders because they're on a Zoom, man. It's hard to leave 17 to 20-year-old dudes like on a Zoom and expecting them, like, because you're coming back, like these guys here, like we were number 5 in the country. Obviously, Mike Sowers graduated, went to Duke, did great things, but like guys like him and guys returning, they put the foundation down here. So it's like those got to be such good leaders. So for me, I look at it this way: like me coming to this job, I had to learn originally 20 names, guys who didn't do the gap year. So the number of kids that coming in were like 30. So I was outnumbered by that. So next year, I'm gonna know about 40 of them, and 10 are going to come in, whatever the number is. I don't know the numbers, but 10 are going to come in, and they're that 40 know my terminology. Now I can grab those freshmen and do, like, if I want to supplement a more freshman volume program, if I wanted to, and trust those seniors to do what they need to do. But at the same time, like, I want those freshmen not to feel isolated. So I probably will do a program within a program and say, okay, we're gonna do, for example, if we're gonna do 5x5 squat for those seniors, those freshmen do 5x5, 3x5. So, but you have to pair with the and teach them the motion, to do something a little bit more of that, because now I have more eyes, more coaches in my sense of guys, because those leaders, this gap year had to be such leaders because of the distance, because of dealing with diversity. So for me, it was really cool to see those guys here, like guys, Chris Brown, George Bond, our captains are from all across the country, like from Philly to Colorado, Gardens, Long Island. So they're all over in all different backgrounds. So it's cool to see those guys lead, but it was even cool to see those freshmen lead them at first. And once those guys got comfortable, they got back in their place pretty fast, because it's just the nature of the beast.
No, that's awesome. That's a lot of adversity, obviously, thrown at them. And I think everybody in that situation, like the COVID year athletes for all sports that came back, like there was a lot of maturing that had to go on. There's a lot of like tough conversations, like tough things that kind of throw that way. And it really shows more so how important it is to have the people in that locker room, those athletes that are on the team, find ways to lead themselves, because it's important. It's got to be most important to them, like over the coaches and everything. And I think it's a testament to laying the foundation for all those teams, and how important like that camaraderie and what you're able to do in the off season really supports what you're able to do when in season turns around. And if you guys are not jiving and things aren't going well together in the off season, when push comes to shove and shit gets hard in season, there's no way you guys are going to crumble.
Yeah. It's like one of those things that, like, these captains, these upperclassmen in this fall ball were so diligent about, like, them running practice and them doing this. And it was like almost like, what we need coaches for? Because all that practice sometimes, but you realize that obviously with Ivy hours, you can't be there all the time. So having those, that's one thing I didn't have to experience. Like, these guys come in, like, school is priority. As much as we say at other schools, but like here, you cannot. Like, it's one of those things. So they get their schedule, they make their school schedule first, then their practice schedule. They all had an idea where practice is going to be at, but like, if you got to leave practice early. So for them, it was like, okay, guys, we're going to have this is our block for practice. Captains made it when in the fall ball, and all our guys have to be there. They had that assignment. That was they're like, we're not pick class other times. That was on them. For me, it was like my coach gave me a sheet and he goes, these times are blocked for practice. Pick your schedule. Like, and here it's a lot different.
Yeah, that is the complete opposite of how most people operate. And
yeah.
And there's not many people. I've got some friends at Stanford, and I have a few friends in like different Ivy League schools, but the same way, like you don't really and like the academies and everything are completely different as well. But the Ivies, like we talked about it before, like study hours or dead days are like 2 weeks long. Exams are almost 2 weeks long. Like you just said too, like scheduling, it is definitely student athlete first. So like, how important for you is like managing some of the stress and the training load? Because obviously, like you said, during COVID, like we're not conditioning, we're not doing a lot of these things. Does that kind of apply the same way, where you're not doing a lot of like volume work or a lot of extra things that aren't necessary, because you know how heavy their school schedule is and how like stringent their normal schedule needs to be, and that it's like you said, it has to be optimal in that weight room? Is that kind of right?
Yeah. So it's when I first got here, my objective honestly was like, I'm gonna get these kids as strong as possible. We're not gonna run as much. They practice a little bit, but this is the time for these younger clubs. They all need volume. They all need to be underneath the bar. And honestly, like player loading at that point, because we were just practicing, wasn't a big priority for me. Like, obviously I was watching them and they weren't walking to class, it was all virtual. I mean, And you know how that went for students. So like, you're at Princeton, you're at Harvard, you're at Stony Brook, Hofstra, like sitting at a computer all day, you're gonna be twiddling on your phone, figure out things out. Like it is what it is. So I wasn't really worried about that. But the more so I got into the fall, I was like, we're doing the sprint stuff, but obviously being out of school like this, like, and I wanted to as well. I wanted to make sure that we're optimizing that, and that's what we came with catapult. And so when we had the catapult idea, we did RPs a little bit last year, but I feel like RPs just even here or anywhere, getting kids to plug in a freaking number. It's like pulling teeth. Like it's like, hey, put your number, what's your RP, and it's like, oh, I did it 4 hours later. I think I felt like a 6. Like how true can it be? So for me, it was like we got the catapult and using it for our conditioning or our sprint days and practice. I would just look and kind of realize what I was doing based on what the load was. Like in fall, we did like a tier system method. Then we got to the season, I did like a high-low method. So like our higher load in practice usually are Tuesday, Wednesday. And then kind of that lift early in the week was like more of a heavier day. Then like that Thursday, that Wednesday was more like a explosive day up and down, more 4v3s, fast break stuff. And Friday is more like a ballistic, med ball, plyos day, like more of flexible, feeling good on Friday. So that's how our method changed. But a lot of those numbers change based off like the catapult numbers, the player load. So kind of give like getting a number from that, because you have an idea of what guys are going through. But like here, it would be like, realize I'm like, what time are you guys up to? They're like, up to 2 o'clock studying. I'm like, dude, like I didn't do that at all in my college. Like I was just going to bed. Like they didn't have to hear almost. And it's like one of those things, you come in and I'm like, how many? Like, I asked guy, you look like crap today. And I just cut the volume in half, to be honest. Like I miss that war of me having a kid come in, train as hard as you can, work mentally at school as hard as he can, then go and practicing. Like something has to give. So for me and me being flexible, I can give, because this one day isn't gonna destroy us long term. Obviously, you do like a couple more days. You might have to look into your sleep schedule, how you're preparing, stuff like that. But these guys are a lot of the guys, I'm very fortunate. I think a lot of schools, but here specifically, they're very mature when it comes to that school academic stuff. They know the standard. They know how much time they need. So I'm like, for me, I'm like, I can say we're gonna do this lift today, but if half the team looks like crap, I'd rather play on the safe side and pull half the volume down, cut the running down, whatever it is, to know that practice, that practice that night is more optimum. At the end of the day, they play lacrosse. My training helps them be better lacrosse players, but I want to take away from that either.
No, I think that's a smart way to do it. Obviously, I think you're setting them up for success too. And it's awesome. Like it's good to have those resources and try subjective ways, and then like use catapult and find some objective ways. But if you know, like those conversations too, like that's where you're really getting the bulk of your information. Like catapult probably just solidifies some of the decisions you've been making more so than anything. But yeah, like we talked about, you have to be pretty flexible and adaptable as a strength coach. So knowing what their schedule looks like, and it's pretty much set in stone, you just don't know their studying and all the other extracurricular stuff they have going on after it. Like you said, something's got to give. And if you want to keep them healthy, you want to keep them on the field and still advancing and progressing to like academically and athletically, then where's the one thing we're going to change? At least the one place we can control. And that's, for us, that's the weight room.
Yeah, I think for me, like understanding, like, and I should go back to that honesty thing. And this may not sound like super friendly to everybody else, but like I'm to the point with some of my athletes, I'm like, to the captains, like, did guys go out drinking last night? This is across the board with all my teams. And they're like, maybe they did. Like Thursday's a big night here. So like for me, I'm like, okay, like, but how mature are we going to be about it? Like, are we going to be like all hungover? Or are we going to come in and work and be mature about it? And different teams are different things, but having that honesty back and forth, because you come in here now, I'm like, okay, my standard goes from, and not that I want it to be, but it goes from okay, a 10 to now a 7. But now that you're at an 8 or 9, energy high and stuff is going on, I'm like, okay, you can be mature about this. Because at the end of the day, like this college experience, I mean, it's part of your college experience. As much as we want to win, I want to provide the best version for you. So if I mean cut down the volume, that means having a conversation. That means talking to coach about some things. That means talking to captains about some things. to be more honest about what we got, what we want to do. And that for us, for lacrosse, we won the national championship, won our Ivy League tournament. Everything around that had to be around that. So it was like, we did drink last night, coach. Okay. Like, are we functional to do this lift? Yeah, I think we're good, coach. But that's, and people may say like, oh, they're going out and drinking, but like, come on, like we understand how that thing goes, but you have to optimize with that, what you have in front of you. You can't just complain about, or you might have like for us, like we played Maryland. We played the best team in the country. A Bugs told me had a 3-hour delay. And they've been in the last 5. They've been in the last 4 Final Fours. They've been here before it happened to them last year. Princeton hasn't been there in, I don't know, 18 years. So like you deal with stuff all the time. You have to optimize what you have. So I think that's the biggest thing with the trust. I keep saying that because I think if you want to be a really, really good strength coach, it's not about X and O's. You want and it may sound crazy, you want your team to almost follow you blindly because you know you're not going to steer them wrong and be real with them completely. Like, and the thing about me playing lacrosse, I can be with them on and off the field. Like, played like shit, you lifted like shit, not playing. But it's lacrosse, like in diving, I may not be able to say that. I may say, hey, like you're not more engaged on the boards. Like you did crap in practice today. Like you didn't come, you said your ankle hurt, you didn't go to rehab. What's going on? Then from there it goes, oh, coach, I got a girlfriend, boyfriend issue. School stressing out. Then from there, I can supplement something else or say, hey, come to lift the next day. How was your significant other? How was your test? How was that? Now that energy goes up a little bit. He's more invested in the lift today because I care about him enough. Now he has better practice. But August starts by me asking questions and being real and honest with my guys and girls.
No, I couldn't agree more. That's awesome. I think that it's a sliding scale and it always is moving. And yeah. I mean, if we have a goal in mind and the majority of teams' goals, whether they say it or not, and whether their actions reflect it or not, is to win. And it's to win at a high level, conference, national championships, like be successful, have a great college experience. But that road is not linear. And
yes,
there's a lot of detours that end up happening. And how you react to those things, like how you react to a weather delay, how you react to a different opponent being placed in front of you, a situation, a bad grade, that's really where your bread and butter is. And that's where you're going to have success, or you're going to be deviated off the path if you don't handle that properly. And those are great points, obviously. And I couldn't agree more with those things. And we talked about it, like obviously COVID's a huge setback, and that's a lot of adversity thrown to everybody. Everybody in the world dealt with it. The Ivies dealt with it in their own way. But like that's something that we collectively did. Like individually dealing with some of those setbacks and unfortunate situations, you dealt with those a little bit, like with your career, with injuries and everything. Obviously, it sets you up for the position you're in. But what advice would you have for athletes maybe individually going through some of these tough times? And for you, did like anything like training or like playing still or anything under the bar, like really kind of help you through those moments of weakness?
So back in high school, I never forget this. My junior in high school, I had like one offer for football. And I was like, I need to make something different. I'm going to dedicate myself to whatever, like my craft, whatever it was, getting bigger, playing, like do whatever. And I wrote things down and I put on my wall. So on my wall, I have a picture of it. And I still now carry my wallet. My wallet's downstairs, but I put on my wall. I put all conference, all county, all state, all metro, all state. And from that point on, from my senior year, I hit all conference, all county. So I put things down on paper and make sure and let you know it's always about the long term. No matter what it is, all about the long term. So for me, that long term for us in college, we have 4-year gap. I mean, because we don't have transfer, we have a very few transfers, and most of them I don't deal with. If we do it, maybe in football we have them, but I don't deal in transfers. So I have a 4-year gap with all my athletes. So this long term plan is like, okay, and you have to be real and honest, understanding where we're at. So this is me starting out there. I have a swimmer. He comes in, I want to be an All-American coach. I want to be an Olympian. I'm like, well, you're 17. You haven't physically matured yet. Let's be realistic. Not to say we can't do it because I'm like 100%. But what are your times now? If he says I need to make 20 seconds, I'm like, dude, 20 seconds is Come on, like, but that's the kind of understanding, real honestly, you need to have with yourself and with your teammates, with a coach who gonna get there. And you know, you don't need to make an annual plan, but take these steps to where you're gonna be at. And I refer back to me. I'm like, hey, I got to college. I weighed, I don't know, 175. I didn't lift at all in college. I stayed at 175 almost my whole career. I got the Hofstra, gained 15 pounds just lifting. Paid at 190. I was a better lacrosse player ever was. I didn't hit my pinnacle in lacrosse until I went to Hofstra. Be honest. Like I tore my ACL my junior year. That I sat on my senior year. So 2 years was taken away from me. But I got those years back. But it was like very fortunate. But I was like, I was rejuvenated. It was a long-term idea of like me playing lacrosse. Like I didn't never want to get drafted, never wanted to go to the MLL. I was just like, it's a viable thing. But my goal was I want to be a captain of a team. That was my ultimate goal, to be a captain of the team. I want to change the people around me's view of lacrosse, but what a lacrosse teammate can do. And I sense by that, I think people had the idea, and you hear like lacrosse are like cocky, arrogant guys. You hear that compliment, but like I wanted to be the best version of a teammate, best captain. And obviously in lacrosse, there's not very many African-American players in lacrosse. I want to be the best person presented. It's just happened to be Black in lacrosse. Because now you're like, okay, now you're talking about a small group of people in lacrosse now. The Miles Joneses, the Kyle Harrison, the Chad Woodsons, the Isaiah Davis Allen. There's a small group of people who reached that pinnacle, you know? So like for me, like I wanted to be sure to check that box, make sure anybody interacted with me. Like they knew that Mark's not only a good lacrosse player, but he was always a good person. So for me, like having an idea of who you are, where your goals wants to be, they're not the goal right now, the long-term goal, because if you keep short-term goals, you have to reset them. Like for me, like my ultimate goal was to be an All-American. And I did that, but I did it my senior year. You know what I mean? Like, and you can have those goals, not saying you have to make it a 4-year goal, but just have it in mind, always keep it there. And I tell people, tell somebody you care about. Don't tell anybody random people about what your goal is, because the random people just throw it in your face. But your real friends, like my friends call me now, and my friends call me now and go, hey, like when they saw me as a strength coach, they kind of bugged them out because like I told them I want to be a strength coach for a top program. So they came to the Yale game, and my buddy was literally crying. He's like, "This is so cool," because you put it in the group chat, But like you have good friends, and they hold you accountable for that kind of stuff. Like good teammates do that. Like I have an openness with my team. I go, "Hey, tell your teammate what you really want." I go, "Be a lax rat. Tell your teammate what you really want." And you go, "I want to be an All-American." But now you're almost vulnerable when you tell somebody that, because it's like, "Oh crap!" Like. They think I'm weird or I'm that or this. But now that person knows a little bit more about you. But when you having those bad days, you're going to be second line attacking. You're going to be 140 pounds. You're 130. And they kept reminding you, keep taking that way, to keep chipping away at what you want to get. So I think that having a good support staff overall, having a long-term goal for yourself, and like you said, it's gonna be a roller coaster, man. Like it's gonna be a cool roller coaster because you go full circle and about even about the whole like the strength conditioning world. It's up and down, man. Like you get flashes, you hear about things. Oh, people's making so much money and people are doing this. You realize it's like, whoa, okay. I need to adjust my realization, but now I need to branch open to other avenues to make revenue, make me more popular, be more of a strength coach to my athletes, be more specific to my athletes. I think every coach isn't pitch and plug in everywhere. I think it's just a different area. Like I don't want to say this, but like high volume football coaches at Power 5 schools, maybe you can't work at Princeton. That's because they can't function that way. But like with the school recommendations and all that kind of stuff, like those windows you guys have for Ohio State windows, Texas windows for training, we have a fraction of that. Like so like those understanding those kind of things is also huge.
No, it's great. I think like you said, everybody has some different goals, and it's easy to see when someone accomplishes it or gets like All-American or All-State or whatever it is that like maybe someone else has the same goal in mind. It's easy to say, well, they can do it. Like, that's what I want to do. That's great. But like you said, those small goals along the way on the way to the long-term one, that's really what set them up to actually achieve that one. It wasn't just a flash in the pan sort of thing. The same with like coaches. Like you see coaches we know that are making a lot of money at a certain school, or they've lined themselves up for a certain profession. Like for them, that was probably a goal. Like I want to be whatever. I want to be like Tennessee, like head football strength conditioning coach. That was probably a goal set out for them. And like along the way, they've been the head coach for 5 different places to get to that place. So most people will just look at it and be like, well, he's making so-and-so at Tennessee. It was like, well, they set themselves up along the way to get to that position. It's not just something that falls into people's lap. And if it does, it's usually pretty short-lived and they falter. And I mean, to your point too, there's a lot of jobs out there that are very unique until you get to them. And there's a lot of people that probably either turn them down or think that they can handle those situations, or they can handle some of those accolades and goals that we talk about, but they're not prepared for it when they actually receive it, or it's a one and done sort of thing. So
I think the biggest thing too, like, I don't say, I'm going to talk about our career path in general. I think I relate it to almost like chefs. It's like the idea of you going to an intern, you make no money, you're around these great people who sometimes you think are making this much money and they're not making this much money, but they love what they do. So the money seems like it's almost dispensable. It's like whatever. But then you get to the point where you're like, I need to be able to feed myself. Like you get to that point as well. And you're like, okay, how do I make this more functional? But you know, those coaches who make a lot of money, majority of those coaches interned for nothing, volunteered for nothing, years. And because you think about, I always think about those coaches. I'm like, the coaches make a lot. And you're like, you know, sometimes you get like, dude, that coach is making that much money. Then you realize he's about 60 years old. He's hopped over every state, continent, whatever we need to do to get there. And I think sometimes we just kind of put it to a side, but it's a lot on the family. It's a lot on your career, a lot on like yourself, your mental self as well. Something for me, like seeing those coaches make down, see those coaches do that. It's all part of the goal. Like their goal could be at Ohio State strength coach or a football strength coach. Nicky Marotti, who's been there been at high level programs his whole life almost, but he didn't always make that money. And people always, and I don't want to talk about people's money, but it's like people have this idea in strength and conditioning that like all these Power 5 schools make this, and it's like sometimes it isn't like that. Or something, but like you could get to a spot where you could be a great D3 school and getting, I haven't saying getting paid, but getting paid and less stress, a great camaraderie, a great school that supports you. You're not worried about your job getting cut. You know, like that is the goal for me, to be in somewhere that I can be successful at, make a living for myself, obviously, but be around people who want to be great. I don't have to stress other stuff. We don't have like, obviously at Princeton, but we're not dealing with media. We're not dealing with that kind of stuff. Like, and like we have a couple like I think NLLDs, but we're not dealing with like that stress of like our school is going crazy with that. So I think with strength and conditioning, that kind of figuring out who you are and striving for more rather than the money and the other stuff that comes with it. Because your biggest advocates, your biggest marketing tools are your athletes, the biggest ones, and your coaches.
Yeah, I think you said it well, because like I think success and happiness is not always just going to be financial. Yes. And that is kind of the outward lens and perspective. Is the bigger notoriety of a program, the more success of a program, or even going from high school to college to professional, or D3 to D2 to D1, like the higher you get is the more successful coach, or the more like a higher paid coach, or the more prepared coach, whatever it ends up being, however you want to deem it. But that is like a lot of people's perspective of what it is. But I know plenty of coaches. I've worked for plenty of coaches that are sitting at some spots that most people would scoff at, and they fucking love it.
Love it.
And they have it. They have the situation set up. They're killing it. Like that's where you want to be, I think. And I know some other people have said the same thing. Like when I left an FBS school, I left Fresno State to go to Jacksonville, and I left for my own reasons, and I could tell people whatever their reasons are, but fuck you. I don't need to. Like I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I knew that it set me up for my goals. It set me up for the position I want to be in, and ultimately I was happier. So if that is my version of success, if that's how I'm going to define it, then that's the perfect job for you. And that's why there's a lot of positions out there. We talked about people leaving college, people going to high school. I mean, Bryant's men's lacrosse coach just retired to go to high school in Texas. Like, you want to talk about someone that was successful. There's plenty of people out there that take jobs for things that are not just bigger paychecks or bigger logos. It doesn't matter. No,
I think that's the big thing too is, and you know how many guys, you know, especially some of your friends, if they don't know what your career is, like, yo, why don't you coach at California? Why don't you coach at USC, or why don't you coach at Florida? Why don't you? It's like, first of all, like I don't want no part of football. Like right now, I don't. I just think it's a lot going on. I think it's just not stable. But people think the logo is so big and what it is. If you tell a guy, okay, you get to make, I don't know, let's say $70,000 in Texas. You work Monday through Friday. You work 3 hours a week. And everybody like every strength coach in the country like this, I'll probably take that. Cost of living is down. I'm in Texas. I get to work with high school kids. I only work 40 hours a week. You're like, oh, people on the outside are like, oh, this is not the Power Five. This isn't the goal, but it is my goal. Like, that is the goal, to be somewhere where you're comfortable enough to be like, I find success not in winning a national championship, but seeing my athletes win, seeing that growth. Like, the biggest reward for me is seeing, and I'm still young, I'm 28, but kids I coached come back and say, call me coach. I still call my coaches coach. And they're like, don't stop calling me coach. I'm like, no, you're my coach. I always will be my coach. So that's the thing I think what's so cool about our career as well is, like, you can find your niche. You can really find your niche. You have to work for it. It may not be everywhere you need to be, but like, if you work hard enough, or you network, you kind of make, guys have, like you said, people have sick hidden gem of jobs. And it's like, I think one of them, I'm fortunate to be in one of them. I think here at Princeton, I think it's awesome. The people here, the energy here, and you get to work. I work with sports, a lot of different sports, but I get to see a numerous amount of sports. We have water polo here. Never seen that before. Fencing. I mean, I saw fence before. I never had teams like at my school fence. Men's volleyball. Never seen a men's volleyball team. Like, that kind of stuff in school. Rowing. I think rowing has won 3 national championships yesterday. Like, that's crazy. We have a national championship in fencer. So I go there, like, I'm walking to her. I'm like, I'm going to get your autograph. Like, you're the national champ. Like, that's cool to see at a school like this. But I think by other schools in general to have that ability, I think just the logo in general, yeah, it's cool to be at a Power 5 school. But it's also cool to be at a D3 school. And you win national championships, and you have a sick facility, and the school's behind you. Like, that's really cool too.
Yeah, I'll rep Salisbury all day for our D3 national championships.
Come on now. You know, that's, and I think a lot of coaches will take that. Man, shit. I think, coaches will take the environment, and, you know, like the energy that comes with that, the contagious of, like, just want to be a part of it. And once you get hooked on that, I think that's what kind of got me hooked. But obviously, I love Princeton, but that itch to see those guys feel that Final Four. I have a swimmer who made it to the NCAAs. I had a tennis girl who finished top 5. Like, I'm so cool to be like in the room with them. You understand? I'm like, dude, you are, coach, you help me out. So I don't help people crap. Like, you are that mindset of being successful and striving for that. I'm only a piece of that. I'm the guy in the back. Like, you guys are driving this bus. I think it's cool about it because now you go from a coaching player role to like a coaching role. And coaches, I think about it going back, athletes very rarely like shock me. Whatever you did, your parents just say it. Like, I've done that before, but now, like, in the room, in the weight room, like, I actually see that.
That's awesome. No, that's my feeling exactly. Like, chasing after that culture and that camaraderie and that feeling of being part of something bigger and striving for success. I think that's awesome. But it really comes down to, like, career path, like, athletically, like, where you choose to play or what you choose to do. Like we said, I think it sums it up. It's your goal. It's yours specifically. And I think, to your point, sharing it with people and, like, really
the right people.
Yeah. The right people. That, I think that's huge. So, kind of touching on, like, exactly what you said, that role shift now that you're getting older and now you're starting to have some of the old coach mannerisms and sayings that you could pull out. What was like your transition from player to now coach? Like, what's your training look like now that you're not on the pro circuit anymore? Like, what are you doing to still stay active and like practice what you preach on the off time?
So what I do, so first of all, like our group chat, we have a group meet. A lot of my athletes, like most of my lacrosse, like I've all my athletes, but like particularly for lacrosse, we have like a gains only group chat. Guys who need to gain weight, so like call it gains only. So guys, freshmen, so freshmen going to be sophomores next year, and I kind of keep in touch with those guys a lot more because they need a little bit more pushing. But training wise, like I do just like them almost. I do an off-season training program right now. I'm doing like almost like I get to do like bodybuilder stuff. Like I get to when I'm in season with them, I do cleans, I do more. But like now I'm like they want to put on weight. Like I'm like with them. I'm like if you guys put on weight, I'm putting on weight. So I'm doing like pyramid sets right now. This morning I did squat. I did 12, 10, 8, 6, 6, 8 back up. It was miserable. But it was one of those things like I just want to be where my athletes are in the sense of like they're in off season, I'm in the off season. And kind of feel they win. I still have that itch to play with those guys and alumni games. I get out there to play with those guys and stuff like that. So it's cool to still be around the game. But training, if it doesn't change much, I think I'll say probably a little bit more volume because I don't have the practice stimulus.
I gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it, especially for people young in their career to like pick a team or follow along or be a little bit ahead of what your team is doing. Because if you're still kind of wary about what you're doing or how athletes are going to respond, or even like you're moving up a level, like or like competitive level or division or whatever it is, or like for you, like the Ivy League, like that's a different type of stress. Like what you're doing, lifting is different. Like obviously you're coaching, you're on your feet, you work with multiple teams, but like we talked about before, the stress and demand of them being up till 2 a.m. studying, going to all these classes, doing all these extra things, clubs, whatever it is, like that still is outside stress that goes into the program. So if you know exactly what the program is intended to do, even better, then you can make those changes a little bit better on the fly when you get a team that's coming in dragging or they're firing on all cylinders. So I think that's a great thing to do to like kind of stick to that. And then, like you said, keep the young bucks ready and firing, because it's challenging to come into a new program where a team has had success like they are, like you did this last year, but also is built on success and tradition. And to come in and school, be away from home, freshman at an Ivy League institution, and then try to play lacrosse, like that's pretty overwhelming. And to get all those guys on the same page and communicate with them and kind of lift and be a part of it a little bit with them, I think that probably breaks down some of those like barriers a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I think the barrier breaking it down. And this year was honestly, I don't call it a test year, but it was almost like, because I know what works at Hofstra. I know what works at Stony Brook because I've been around those places. So I know what would work at Princeton was like me sprinting the guys a lot more. I'm like, just to be successful, like people like, you need to condition a little bit more. And I was just kind of like trying to figure out if this worked. Like, and I don't say it worked because I don't know yet. Because obviously it got to where we are at, but like it's still a kind of an uphill battle. Trying to figure things out. But it's more about what the kids buy into and what I can provide them with, like just more knowledge and understanding about how to change and adapt. So that's like my methods of what I try to implement more and more. The athletes here specifically want to know why we're doing certain stuff, and I love that because it gets the kind you get to show off a little bit because it's like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. Because you know you have sometimes the coaches or you played, so you have coaches like, we're going to do this, and like you might not say that, you might say, but like, why are we doing this? But like when guys ask me why I say it, oh, this is why we're doing it. It's like, oh, it's towards. So why we do kneeling starts, for example, it's like, oh, when we're working acceleration, low center of gravity, knee drive, boom. Those kind of pit points is like, okay. Some guy may like, oh, we're never gonna be on my knee when I'm picking up a ground ball. It's like, that's not what we're working on. So having that more implemented to what you do off season, in season, when I'm doing with them, I think is very beneficial.
No doubt. Yeah, I think that to have a team that's interested in the why and the purpose behind it, and that's kind of a little bit inquisical, it is cool because it's a time you can actually like, oh, you want to know.
Yeah.
And if you know that like right off the hand, because everybody should at that point, like I think you double down on the buy-in right away.
Yes.
And if you're a really good coach, I think like as any leader should be pretty humble about what they're doing and not have an ego. So if you don't know, don't program it. But if
No.
they ask a question and you don't know, that's the perfect opportunity to say, no, I don't, but I'll get back to you. But if it's in the program and you can explain why you're doing it, why it relates to their sport, or why that person's doing it, like that person should be bought in forever.
Yeah, like prime example. One of my freshmen after this year asked me, and the year, like, Coach, we're going to snatch. And I said to him, I go, why do you want to snatch? He goes, it looks cool. That's what he said to me. And I go, I broke down, is risk worth the reward? First of all, I'm not a great snatcher, to be honest with you. I can clean, I can jerk, I can overhead press, I split jerk pretty fine. But cleaning for me, just not one of my movements. Snatching for me, not one of my movements. And like, okay, I'm like, risk versus reward. You're a freshman. I go, your posterior chain sucks. And possibly you getting hurt. I mean, you have to talk to coach about you getting hurt. Is a different direction. He goes, coach. He goes, coach, that's why you make the big bucks. I go, no, it's like simple, stupid. If I get you in triple extension doing trap bar jumps, cleaning, jumping, weighted jumps, vertimat, whatever it is. If I could do that and still become a better lacrosse player, I'm going to do that. And eventually, if we get to the point where we can do that, like my swimmers, some of them already cleaned before, or snatched before, I can work towards that, but not everybody goes through that. But that's when you're asking the question, you're giving give and take. And you give the more they understand about what your idea behind things are, the more start to invest and realize, okay, this is what coach's mindset is. Because you get these packets in the summer and stuff like that, and your coaches aren't communicating, or if the coaches that don't communicate with you, they go into the pack and they do them completely wrong. You know what I mean? Like that's the issue too, because you have an idea of what someone else goes through. Their other coaches coach, which I'm perfectly fine with. I kind of tell my athlete to go get coached by somebody else. Like if you want to go get coached, make sure it's reliable. Like I like to know what you guys are doing, but I'm not one of those coaches who are like, oh, you have to do my program in the summer. I think stimuli. I think if you're going through a good coach for the last 5 years, 6 years, you trust him enough, and it got you to this point. What I'm going to ask you to do is sprint. I'm going to ask you to hinge. I'm going to ask you to do the basics. Other than that, go have fun. You come back here, be in shape. If you don't, then we're going to go talk another conversation. But that's earned. That's earned from sophomores, juniors, seniors. And a lot of like I haven't dealt with those yet. This would be my second group, I guess, of returners. That last group with the 20 guys, be my second year returners. So having those guys understand what they're doing and be more understanding, asking questions, and know what they want out of it too. Like, coach, I want to be more explosive. I go text me, coach, I want to be more explosive. How can I supplement some more explosive stuff? I go, do you have any equipment? He goes, I have like some med balls. I go, perfect. I go, not big fatiguing, not a big stress on the body. You can do med ball stuff, med ball throws, hinges, whatever it is. But give him that alternate to what he wants to do. And he wants to go, and you do it that way. And you supplement that way.
There you go. Yeah, I think giving them some feedback and for them to understand where you're coming from and what your program entails, I think that's huge, because otherwise, like to your point, when they go home and they're looking at the summer packet, they're looking at their winter packet, it's just words on a paper if they don't know what your intention is. So
yeah,
for them to ask questions and for you to provide feedback and understanding, like those kind of words come to life. And not to sound like really cliche or really dumb with that,
but they do. Like today, I had a kid come in, 2 athletes come in, and they're like, what are we doing, coach? And today was the first day of the packet. And I go, we're doing eccentrics. The guy goes up. I go, I'm telling you right now, we've been on a week out or 2 weeks out. Take the weight. We're doing it very, very light. Undercut yourself. And we did 5 sets or something, like 4 is 5-second eccentric. And he's like, oh, that's why I went lighter. I go, yes, you want time under tension. What is time under tension? Hypertrophy, muscle growth, either volume or time under tension. Oh, so I'd rather not do sets of 12, 4 sets of 12, because your technique breaks down. I'd rather just do 4 sets of 5 eccentric, and have a lighter weight, be more secure, more safety, but now the time under tension. And I know you're going through the motions correctly. Your form's correct. So like, oh, that's why I'm not doing Ronnie Coleman's bench workout because you can't handle the weight. I'd rather you be on time and attention and have the fundamentals right.
Love it. That's awesome. Hey, so like any good training session, we end the show with a good finisher, and it's perfect for lacrosse. We got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and overtime at the end. So
let's go.
You can go as quick as you want. You can go fast. You can go fast, just like all your sprint work, or you can take your time on each question. But you ready?
Yeah, let's roll.
All right. I might know this one, but first, biggest influence in strength and conditioning and favorite lacrosse player.
Biggest influence in conditioning, Jimmy Prendergast, Hofstra University. Big mentor. He's been there he was there for 20 years. Just stepped out to be a little bit tactical, but he's if I didn't find him, I wouldn't be where I am. And I tell him that all the time. My favorite lacrosse player. Growing up, it was the Brattons, Shamel Ramel, because they're Long Island guys. Huntington, I can touch them and feel them. Also, obviously Kyle Harrison. Who else was I watching really? Those guys are like, for me, were like the big ones for me, honestly. Right now, my favorite cosplay to watch right now. Who's my favorite cosplay to watch right now? I gotta shout out my boy Chris Slanian. He's with the Whip Snakes. He's a attackman here. He's a volunteer here, but he's my favorite to watch now.
Oh, there you go. One of my JU players just got picked up by the Whip Snakes. So
hell yeah.
There we go. Hey, so what can you be found doing when you're not coaching or training? What are some of your hobbies that are maybe not strength and conditioning related?
I like to cook. I like to cook in the kitchen. I've been slacking lately, but I've been doing a lot of reading. Like last year I read like almost 35 books, something like that. I also did 75 hard, so that definitely helped. Yeah, probably reading or cooking, honestly. That's been a lot of my friends all my friends in Long Island. I have obviously friends at work and stuff, but here is more so cooking, walking, and chilling pretty much right now.
There we go. Hey, if you weren't coaching, what do you think you would be doing as a profession? And if you could go pro in any sport except lacrosse,
okay,
which would that be?
If I wasn't a coach, I'd definitely be a chef. I think I'd be a sick chef, culinary chef. I work the same hours pretty much. I think that'd be so cool being a 5-star chef. And yes, no, I think same thing with coaching, knowing that your product, what you do, the process, you get the end result, but it takes time and people embrace it and respect what you do. Go to any really good steakhouse or stuff like that. Like, dude, this guy put his foot in this. Like, this is amazing. Same thing with strength and conditioning. Like, you see the product, it may not be right then and there. It may be 3 weeks, maybe a year, maybe 4 years, but like that kind of process. And a sport I would play. Okay, now I have this debate all the time. I think the coolest would be, I think the coolest would be basketball, but the issue with basketball is I'm very low key, and you can't be low key when you're 6'10". So I would either go soccer in America, because I think for I'm not talking about David Beckham. I'm talking about like somebody from the European League to come over here and just play soccer and make millions and play at a high level. Because I think at that point, people don't really realize or recognize, especially here at least a lot. I feel like they recognize those European, obviously besides Ronaldo and Messi. Like, you see those guys in the European Cup, you're like, dude, those guys make a lot of money, but you never see them. You never notice them when you're walking around. That's what I kind of want to do.
All right. Hey, so if you're setting up an ideal training day for yourself, what is your go-to training music or PR song, and hands down best post-training meal?
Oh, wow. Okay. So music-wise, what do I go with music-wise? I think when I really want to get after, Meek Mill. Anything Meek Mill, pretty much. So I think, yeah, Meek Mill probably top to bottom. Then I would go food-wise. So this is a hard one. I'm gonna be real honest. People are not gonna like this. It's not that many, where I'm at in New Jersey, there's not that much good food. Like, I was so used to Long Island and like having like any type of food, anywhere. But like my go-to after like a hard training day, like after a leg day, like today, I had 2 bowls from Chipotle, double meat, barbecue, a half and half, barbacoa steak, white rice, and everything down to the left. Everything down. 2 bowls.
The
Yeah.
works.
The work, literally.
Hey, so last one I got for you for overtime. What is the most valuable piece of advice you've received, and if you want to share, from who?
Okay. The
Doesn't have to be coaching related either.
Yeah. So it's gonna be coaching. I'm gonna say 2 things. What was it? It was the sharper you are, the easy you cut. If you're always sharp or easy to cut through life, the sharper you are in life, the easy things happen. I feel like when things have to get glossy, you start to lose your way. You usually step away from the things you like the most. Like when you find yourself in a hole in lacrosse or coaching, busy with work, at those moments, I feel like you realize that you're not doing the things you love. That those things you love may be supplemental. You may you can't walk as much or paint as much because you got to work so much. But I think at the same time, you have to supplement those things into it. So like, I think the sharper you are, the easier is to cut. I think that's from Kobe Bryant, something like that. I read that somewhere. But the other one from Jimmy Prendergast is communication is a never ending journey. And that means by that, as a coach, especially but in life, if you could be the best coach in the world. You could talk to your coach every day for the last year. You go 3 weeks without talking to your coach, you're screwed. You're screwed. It's a never ending process because that 3 weeks can ruin a relationship. But you have 20 years of relationship, that 3 weeks, that 2 days of not communicating could put you at a detriment. So communication is always going to be a thing you can never perfect. From emails, from text messages, from callbacks. It's an uphill battle, but it allows you to grow and keep you sharp. So those are the 2 things I think are my biggest takeaways.
No, that's great advice. I think both of those, like you said, keeping everything sharp and the communication piece, those are both never-ending journeys. And
never ending.
Yeah.
And, I'm all about the long term. All about the long term.
Exactly. No, that's a great point. That's awesome, man. Hey, so for anybody that's got any questions, anybody that wants to deliver some good food to you in the Princeton area, anything else, where can they follow you, or where can they get a hold of you to follow up after this?
Yeah, so I think my Instagram, I think it's MT Ellis34 on Twitter and on Instagram. Also just did a paper with Catapult with some of the sprint stuff we're doing at with Princeton Lacrosse. And other than that, I have my YouTube channel for like coaches in general, athletes. It's called the Strength Coach Glossary, exercise library, pretty much, to kind of figure out what athletes want to do over the summer. Kind of pitch and plug. Obviously, you've seen a lot of videos on YouTube, and mine's pretty much no different. But it's more about what my athletes want to see, proper technique in certain exercises, and gives you a variation of exercises. So, and that's more of a hobby, to be honest. I think for my summer programs with COVID, it made it very easy. Because you tell a kid to go do a back squat and he watches someone else do a back squat and maybe different from how you want to do it. And so that's kind of what I do. So it's a Strength and Coach Glossary by Mark Ellis is huge, but other than that, all good.
Awesome, man. Hey, well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Hopefully we'll see if we schedule each other for the next season. It'd be cool to either have you down here or me see Princeton again.
Come on.
Awesome, man. We'll touch base soon and good luck. Enjoy the rest of your summer, man.
You too. Absolutely.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com. where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.